Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. This week's guest sits at this really interesting intersection, something that I explore quite a lot, but not in this way. She sits between art, philosophy, and storytelling. I am joined by children's book author and illustrator Regina Linke. Her work brings this really ancient Chinese brush painting tradition into a really modern context. So she creates using a style of painting called gongbi, which is incredibly detailed and classical form of Chinese painting that's been used for storytelling for thousands of years and kind of passed down in this sort of lineage type form that I feel is quite akin to how yoga is passed down, but it also echoes of ballet or opera in that there is a very strict technique that kind of makes the painting that style of painting. What is most fascinating about Regina is that even though she's such an incredible illustrator, she actually didn't come from an art background at all. She started studying gongbi after she moved her family from Texas to Taiwan in her mid-30s. And she started learning in this very traditional studio environment where the focus was really on, as I said, mastering that craft, copying the techniques learned from masters before us, and not necessarily really developing it into your own personal spin or style. At one point, her teacher actually told her face to face that she probably wasn't going to become a great classical gongbi artist. Ouch. But what she could do was take all that she had learned and make something that is entirely her own, which is kind of what she's done. But she's also done a really amazing job at also spreading this beautiful technique to maybe a wider audience than would have known about it in this context before, which I love. So her work, including the best-selling book, The Ox-Herd Boy, which is also an incredible Instagram. Well, it started as an incredible Instagram, and I'll link it below. Do go and check it out because, as I said, her illustrations are so stunning. It takes really interesting ideas from Taoism, Buddhism, and other Eastern philosophies and turns them into these very beautiful, simple stories for children. So little nuggets of wisdom wrapped up in art and narrative that we can implement really easily into modern day life, which I love. So this conversation, we talk about creative pivots, learning the rules before you break them, something I speak about all the time, sharing your work online, and how those kind of ancient philosophies can really speak to us and to the younger generations today. So I hope that you really love this conversation as much as I loved meeting Regina. So let's dive in, shall we? Regina Linke, a huge welcome to Maverick Mind. Regina, a huge welcome to Maverick Mind. It's an absolute pleasure to sit down with you today.
Thank you. Likewise, Ellie. I think we're going to have a really fun conversation today.
Definitely. I would really there's so many parts of your story that I find really interesting, really intriguing. I would think to kind of introduce yourself to the audience in the best way possible, kind of set up the way that you work and the magic that you create now. I would love to know first the inspiration for you to start creating your children's books. Where did that come from, and what part of your life did that start to manifest itself?
Sure. So I would, if I had to pinpoint like a single catalyzing moment, like a lot of parents, I would say that uh, becoming a parent or, starting to raise a little human being was really the impetus for me to reevaluate what I was doing with my life, how I was spending my time, and really focusing on the opportunities that I would regret the most if I didn't take the opportunity to develop further. And so I always make fun of myself because I feel like it's such a trope to say, oh, I became a mom and so now I'm going to write books for kids. Um, but I don't know that is ultimately how it happened. And there were a lot of different pieces that went into it. It wasn't just becoming a mom, but I also made a huge international move with my husband and my son when he was about 2. And we had been living in California for a while, and just the cost of living was so expensive.
Mm,
We knew that if my husband was going to continue with his freelance job and I wanted to make a career shift, that we needed to move somewhere cheaper. And and I think like that is a piece that I didn't really take into account. I was imagining like a creative life where, oh, I could be in this really cool city, whether it's San Francisco or New York or Seattle, where there's just this like huge community of artists and creative. But at the end of the day, the necessity of being able to provide for my family and the daily grind of, making the finances shake out, it just wasn't coming together. And so we decided to move to Taiwan, which is where my family originally immigrated from. And the cost of living was significantly cheaper. We decided to move into my parents' house. And so there were a lot of these decisions that I did not imagine myself making, in my early 30s. And and so that's kind of an aspect of my creative life that I didn't imagine taking shape in the way that it did. But ultimately, those were kind of the practical decisions that helped me be able to focus on my creativity because I didn't have to worry about paying for my healthcare bills or,
mm,
making rent or things like that. Some of those more worldly worries were addressed by making this big move. And ultimately, being in Taiwan, I had at first gotten into oil painting, realism, a lot of Western style painting inspired by John Singer Sargent and some of the classic artists who painted in that style. But the more that I spent time in Taiwan, the I just began to realize that the opportunity here really is to learn traditional Chinese painting because those studios, those masters just aren't widely available in the US. And so, again, making the decision that I would regret the least, I decided to put a pause on the oil painting and said, I'm here now. Why don't I just try a new art form? And so I found a studio online and I just started from the very beginning. And the style that I paint is called gongbi. And I would describe it sort of as the oldest kind of comics as an
mm,
art form because they not only just in the style, which is really, a heavy ink outline and then filled in with color, but also the way that it's often presented in these long scrolls that you would roll up and look at kind of one panel at a time as it's kind of moving across the screen almost. And it often told a story, whether it was about a spring festival or a particular battle or something like that. And so it started more than 2,500 years ago and really matured and got more and more refined as there were these big swings of, renaissance of like creativity and arts and cultures in the Tang Dynasty and then later in the Song Dynasty. And so that was the art form that I gravitated towards. And so it's a very old tradition, and the studios that I went into were very old school. You're not even allowed to lift a brush before you understand exactly like, what types of ink are you supposed to use, how do you mix the colors properly? How do you stretch a piece of silk onto a frame? How do you ready your materials and how do you get into the mindset to become ready to paint? And then the next step really was to learn the canon, right? To like copy the masters and you're encouraged to basically make like um, passable forgeries in a sense where you have to learn the craft to such a certain level and that kind of rigor was not something that I had grown up with in the States, where a lot of times, yeah, like they like, when I was a kid or a student, if I got into a particular like intro to sketching class, it's like, yeah, like you learn the techniques, but then they also encourage you to kind of develop your own like style or creativity almost right off the bat. That was not the case at all. It actually felt like very like stymied, where I was just like, what is the point of this? Like, there are so many other students who have learned this art form for like 20 or 30 years. Like, why am I here, doing the exact same thing as everyone else? And there was a moment in which my painting teacher actually, you know, looked at me and looked at my work and was just like, for someone born outside of Chinese culture, you're pretty good because um, like, I didn't grow up absorbing this kind of art aesthetic. And I still had a very like US centric, like Western mindset when it came to art and perspective and composition. And so he did compliment me. He was like, "Oh, you're pretty good." And then he was like, "But you're never going to be a great gongbi artist. Like, I just want you to know that." And I'm just like,
Brutal.
"Oh yeah, like okay." And I'm the kid who grew up in the 90s in the US when everyone was handing out participation ribbons and trophies and certificates just for trying.
Mm.
Very different kind of teaching style. But he did give me an out, I would say, where he said, like there are so many other people, like I had said before, who have spent their whole lives trying to master this art form, and only a handful of them might. But you have something different. You have that Western perspective. You have an idea of what a Western audience is interested in. You have an eye for that kind of composition that could be useful. And if you take what you have, which might not get you to be a great gombe artist, but you could forge your own path. And so I was a little deflated when he basically said no to one road, one path, but I think that it was very prescient of him to present another one and to say that it was okay for me to pursue that, even if that wasn't what I expected. And so that's really kind of, not only just motherhood, um, sending me into this different direction of creating what ultimately became my project, the Oxford Boy, but also, I credit a lot of the work to my teacher who, not only told me no in one area, but, said yes to another. And so the Oxford Boy is it's a combination of Gongbi style illustration, I would say, Gongbi inspired illustration, where a lot of the techniques are still reflected. They still reflect the ancient tradition, but it's done completely digitally in Procreate. And the characters that I draw are largely inspired by the questions and the conversations that I have with my son. So I would say like those two pieces really came together in the work.
Yeah, amazing. You said so many things there that I think are really inspiring. The first one is the kind of two points that you mentioned, that maybe the fear of regret overcame a fear of failure, or a fear of
Hmm.
like comfort, I would say, because you can, if you want to live in America, you can just get a regular job or continue having a regular job and make enough money to stay there. But
Hmm.
instead choosing, actually, that I would regret not chasing my creative energy. And I think that that's something that I speak about a lot with loads of people, is sometimes you get this feeling of like you can't not do something,
Hmm.
even if it's going to require a sacrifice. Like moving may have seemed like a sacrifice, but then also it wasn't, because you ended up learning this different style of painting and this whole different thing, and maybe being surrounded by that culture in a way that you hadn't totally been immersed in before, even though obviously you
Right.
grew up with parents from there, but
Hmm.
not without that immersive experience that then would have influenced the stories. within
Right.
books as well. So it's kind of like then choosing uh, the other path. I
Right.
think a lot of us listening to this would
Mm.
definitely resonate with. You think of sometimes we think that we're the crazy ones, um, but actually, without being that person that is willing to go left when everyone else will go right, we
Yeah.
don't create something new. And I think that's really what you've done is created something that I haven't seen before. You know,
Mhm.
a children's book that is um, for a Western market, but influenced by Eastern philosophies and Eastern techniques, but then still
Mhm.
with your own voice. I think we see a lot of
Yeah.
children's books that are kind of similar looking,
Mm.
but yours are like real art pieces to have
Oh,
in your
thank
house.
you.
Before we continue, I want to pause and share something that I built for heart-led creatives like you. Ember is the supportive space to ground, to regulate, to reset, and to grow. Inside, you'll learn how to work with your creative energy instead of against it, so you can move through blocks and deeply trust your voice. You can try Ember for free for 7 days. Just head to the link in the show notes to join us, and I cannot wait to see you inside. Now, let's get back to the episode.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think you bring up a good point because I mean I've been in the place where continued to make decisions, to go right, to go right, to go right because um not to say that I was in a rut, but I think that growing up and facing certain small decisions every day in your life, you make the decision that makes sense, that seems to be in line with how I had been living my life previously. So, like you said, like I could have easily been like, okay, well, I do want to live in San Francisco, and if that's my priority, then yes, I would have to get a higher paying 9 to 5, and then maybe I do the side hustle from in order to kind of continue to develop and invest my creativity, but as a secondary to the higher priority of kind of making rent and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that that works for a lot of people, right? But and so I think I do need to credit my luck that personality wise, that I do have like a good relationship with my parents and that, Taiwan was available to me. Those three things came together in which I felt comfortable going left in that one instance. And so I think that for a lot of people, maybe staying in the States, makes sense for them. And all I can say is like I'm really grateful that I had the chance to, make that decision when I had the chance because I don't think that I would be able to do the work that I am doing today if I hadn't made that choice.
Yeah, definitely. And I think sometimes it doesn't have to be like a big like cross the world move that kind of
Right,
brings
yeah.
somebody into alignment with what feels really true for them. But I
Hmm.
think it can just be an intuitive nudge that doesn't make a lot of sense. Most of the
Yeah.
time our intuition doesn't make a
Hmm.
lot of sense, right? But I think for especially when you're really following this path,
Hmm.
and bringing your own visions into life and creating life on your own terms. I think we can all resonate with having that feeling of like just intuitive pulling to something and it makes
Hmm.
zero sense, but ends up totally changing your life. Like, for example, I can't even remember if I've said this story on the podcast, probably I have, but ages ago. I had that when I was like gearing my way towards going to work in fashion, and I had this random
Hmm.
thought of like, screw this, I want to be a yoga teacher.
Hmm.
and I went to India and then studied to be a yoga teacher. And it was just like a thought that kind of haunted me. And it made absolutely no sense because I hadn't done any yoga classes before, really, apart from on YouTube. And I was 22 at the
That
time.
counts. That counts.
I was 22 at the time, and it wasn't like a right, like now I think doing a yoga teacher training is kind of like a rite of passage, but for a lot of people, and it's
Hmm.
more common, but at that time it really wasn't. That
Yeah.
made no sense. And then like after years later you realize that made complete sense, whereas now
Hmm.
like in your case, like now you can see your work and like feel it in your hands and like hear the stories. makes
Hmm.
complete sense that you did that
Yeah,
for
right,
sure.
right. What is the Kierkegaard quote? Life has to be lived forward, but can only be understood backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely see a lot of that kind of playing out. I mean, similarly, I think that I was never the kind of person who was like, I'm definitely going to be a mom. But also, yeah, like looking backwards, like I would not be doing the work that I am doing today if I didn't have, a kid to think about and a kid to have these conversations with. When he was 4, he started asking me all these really strangely esoteric philosophical questions like, where does my reflection go when I'm not in front of the mirror? And, kind of making connections between that and, life and death, and, the whole like, where do we go after we die? Do we go where the reflections go? And it's kind of like these existential questions where I feel like, when I was in my early 20s, I would like kind of dabble around mentally and kind of like explore, but I was just like, dude, you're 4, man. Like, why? And so I think that, yeah, for someone who didn't know whether they would have a kid or not to be, in his presence now and to be able to soak up his curiosity alongside him, really drives some of the stories and the questions that I noodle with and play with in my writing. So all of that, really kind of came together symbiotically in the books that I make now.
Mm. And you're really influenced by a few different kind of more Eastern philosophies as well.
Mhm.
Were you aware of those teachings long before, or was that something that really came from living in Taiwan?
Yeah, I would say that, as you had mentioned, being raised by Taiwanese parents, the philosophies and the perspectives that influence my writing now came from that. I was completely not conscious of those being what they are. And, it's not like I had a name for them. But it was interesting because as, I was living in Taiwan, they really, because all of those philosophies kind of permeate through the traditions and the culture there. And so it became more apparent and I became more aware of them. And as I started reading some of these classic texts from Buddhism, Taoism, even like the Confucian kind of scholarly works, all in translation because I do not know classical Chinese. Um, but reading some of these ideas, and it was like reading a user guide for like how my parents raised me. It's just like, oh, that's where this is from. That's where that came from. And it was interesting because it was almost like looking under a magnifying glass into my own upbringing, right? That I just wasn't aware of before. And so yeah, I mean, I would say that having had the chance to be more self-aware of, where the values that I often just take for granted as, being truths is like, where did those come from? How did those evolve over thousands of years of, different uh, governments, religions and things like that? Then how did that play out in different parts of China and Taiwan? And what are the things that like the Chinese diaspora ultimately took to the US? And so it's been a really interesting learning process for me, but all of that was relatively recent, like just over the last I don't know, 6 or 7 years at most. So it's not like I grew up with a knowledge or with a working knowledge of that before.
Yeah, but it's kind of quite powerful to then be able to pass on little nuggets of it through your
Hmm.
work, well, to your son, but also
Yeah.
like to whoever else is reading.
Yeah, reading.
Because they
Yeah.
can be quite complex to work your head around, those kinds of philosophies and
Oh,
where they
yes.
come from and stuff. So just to kind of, but when you distill it all down to the small nuggets, like, you're often quite simple, in my experience.
Yeah, I I want to be because something that a previous supervisor when I was working in nonprofits had told me was, an overwhelmed mind does nothing. It
Mm.
can't learn, it can't take in new information, it doesn't accept ideas or perspectives that are different than what it is used to. And so I try to take that into account when I'm writing because I don't that there's different styles of writing where like there is an impactful way to deliver an idea in a way that is revelatory and kind of like blows someone's mind, and I think that can be very powerful. But for my work, because I know that these ideas are so complex that I want the introduction to be soft, and I want to liken it to just a conversation between friends, and to not only introduce a different perspective, but also to link it to something that feels familiar so that it's not so scary. Um, that is the style that I really hope to convey in the work, especially when it comes to kids, because a lot of these topics are deep and can be dissected in multitude of ways, but a child might not be developmentally ready to take on all of those aspects. But so keeping things simple is definitely a priority for me.
Yeah, definitely. Although I think kids see things in a different way as you experience with the very
Hmm.
esoteric questions. But they also want like a very clear answer to things, and
Yep.
sometimes the answer to stuff is not that clear.
Straightforward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
And in your
Hmm.
journey to start to bring the books to life, what's that been like? And have you kind of encountered any feelings of fear or doubt in starting to share your work more broadly, or take
Hmm.
it as like your main job now?
Hmm. Yes. I would say that Uh, when first started the Oxford Boy, it began as an Instagram account, and um, I thought that social media was an opportunity to get my work in front of people who, otherwise would not discover it. And then also it became really a regular practice for me, a regular creative practice. And it was also an exercise in basically becoming less attached to the work, I would say. I do think that when I was working in oil painting, these works took so long. It was so laborious that, and I was putting in so much time and so much of my blood, sweat, and tears into maybe like a single piece. And the stakes just felt so high when I was doing that, such that, I felt, yeah, like scared to show it because it seemed like a rejection of that work would be a rejection of myself. And so I can really identify with that feeling and that fear of sharing. And so when I started kind of illustrating and painting for myself, after my, studio teacher decided to, say that I wasn't going to be a great painter so I could do whatever I want. I was like, all right, fine. And, and so it became a practice where I was like, since nobody is doing this and I don't even know what I'm gonna do, I'm doing right now, I'm just gonna start posting one thing a week. And it's not gonna be like my magnum opus every time. It's like most of it is gonna suck. And I know it, so I don't care if other people notice it either. But at least, I'm practicing, I'm, playing around, just sharing things, and I'm being regular and consistent about it. And so I started posting, and the more often that I just put something out there, didn't really worry about how good it was, the easier it got for me to basically get over really shitty work. Um, and this is something that I've discovered where it's just like it might take 100 posts before I hit on the 101st, in which I'm like, oh wow, like this was really good. I really feel proud of this one. Um, but it took me 100 really bad posts of bad illustrations and really poorly written one, really poorly written works for me to get to this 101st one in which I feel like, oh yeah, like I like this one. And so I would say like the daily grind of putting things out there was really important for me to get over the fear of sharing. Um, and it's interesting because I do feel like in social media, we do get this sense that, oh, everything, especially on Instagram, it's like, oh, everything's polished and perfect and everything's got that filter. But that wasn't the case for me, at least. Like people really responded to the work, whether it was the 100 shitty posts or the 101st one that I really liked. Like sometimes I would post something I liked and like nobody would really like care about it. And like, the one thing that I was just like, I'm just gonna get this out there. And then like, people really, it really resonates with people. So it was just kind of this weird kind of experimental ground in which like I felt like I could detach from the work as a creator, where it's just like I'm just making stuff and it's okay if other people don't like it. Um, and I don't know where I was going with that, but hopefully I answered the
Yeah, no,
question somewhere in there.
I think that attachment is a really powerful thing for people to learn to cultivate if you're struggling with sharing your work right now, or just if you're struggling with um fearing judgment or fearing bad feedback or any kind of feedback,
Mhm.
really. I think that non-attachment is something that we all really need to get used to practicing, both in small ways like social media, because I think now people, we want to be saved by it, really. It's just like we want to put one post out, it go viral, then that'll be like the end of all of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we're all
I'm
good.
set.
Instead of that, I'm just going to post once a week and it's going to take 100, maybe 101. Then I may actually like something that I've done, or you may again look back at something and realize it wasn't that bad anyway. Or
Yeah.
or spend ages on one thing, and then when it doesn't pop off, they feel like, oh well, I liked it, but that clearly wasn't enough for everyone else to like it. And I think like trying to understand the algorithm is like, trying to understand a
Oh,
toxic
yep.
partner. It's just like you're
Who's
never going to
always
get it, so you
changing
might
on
as
you?
well just put
Yeah,
it out
yeah,
there and then just see what happens.
yeah.
But I think also in terms of our vision of where we want to take ourselves, I think that non-attachment is really powerful as well, because we can have a big vision of what feels true to us in our heart, being a published author, I don't know, speaking on stage, singing in
Hmm.
front of however many people, having
Sure.
a show at Fashion Week is like something in your vision that feels true for you. But at the same time, we can't be too stuck on that being it, because then we get fall into, well, if I don't get there, then I haven't made it, or I'm not
Hmm.
successful, or I'm not happy.
Hmm.
Or if this post doesn't pop off the way I want it to, then I've clearly failed at that and I'm not good enough yet.
Hmm.
Um, Whereas actually, I think that when you're not so attached, you allow space to kind of release the pressure. And then without
Hmm.
the pressure, we are then more creative. And the whole process
Hmm.
is a lot more fun, especially with social media. It's way more fun when you just don't have the pressure of everything needing to go viral right now.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is just like such a strange space. I like your analogy where it's like trying to understand like a toxic partner. Um, because it is, yeah, like when I think like, if I were to take it really seriously, um, I would end up spending so much more time on that than actually the creative work. And sometimes it's timing. Like I think that since the algorithm is changing all the time, some people like hit that sweet spot and are able to go viral or hit it big or gain that following, and then that that six-figure deal, right off the bat. But then you could replicate every single thing that they did 6 months later, and it's not going to happen. And so
Mm.
it's really tough, I mean, to operate exclusively for the algorithm, because so much of it is outside of our control. But I mean, I was extraordinarily lucky because I did end up uh, laying the steps for my publishing career, ex pretty much exclusively through social media, like Instagram. I guess this was probably around 2020, 2021, in which my account did go viral. And the interesting thing is that it went viral in stages. So it's not like one post goes viral and then all of a sudden you get like 100,000 followers and then you don't have to do anything else. But like I think one post went viral and then um, I kept I didn't change anything. I kept doing what I was doing. I was just posting once a week. And then it plateaued, and then it went down, and then another post went viral, and then it plateaued. So it kind of just like went in stages. And then I think I was talking with someone who had thought it would make a good launching point for like a children's story idea. And because, the people following me on Instagram at the time were largely adults, kind of young adults. And I didn't think that, kids would really be easy to write for because, as we were saying, the subject matter was, quite complex. But I ended up, like working with a writing coach who had a lot of experience with, picture books, writing for kids. And we worked out a story idea based on the characters that were already on the Instagram account. And then she was like, finding an agent, a literary agent, takes a really long time for a lot of people. And oftentimes literary agents will sign an author and then they'll just ghost them because, they're not like considered a very like profitable investment or an easy sell to editors. And so she was like gearing me to, if this was something that I wanted to do to be traditionally published, that like I had to be in it for the long haul. I had to be patient. And a number of writers do, it could take them 10 years to find like the right agent to who would represent them in a way that they felt, was respectful and a good fit for the work that they were doing. Um, but I ended up finding my agent through Twitter. Like
Oh wow.
it was just completely like happenstance because there was this Twitter pitch event in which like unrepresented authors could basically write a very short tweet about what their work is. If you're an illustrator like I was, like you could share just like one image as an example of your work. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. Like at the advice of this children's book writing coach that I had been working with, and that's how I found my agent. And it only took like maybe like 3 weeks after we
Wow.
were done writing. And so it's like these like pockets of opportunity just seem to open up. And and like my writing coach was like, are you sure this is like the real deal? Like she's a real deal because like there will be agents who will take authors on for a ride and just completely ghost you. Like you need to do your due diligence. And so I did, and I was like, I think it's fine. Like I don't know, like I talked to her, she seems to understand the work, and I still work with the same agent, like, and even now, like 5 years later. Um, and so she, my agent was incredibly helpful because publishing and authorship and, even just being an illustrator was just like a completely new industry for me. I went to school for Spanish and international business, and I worked in international aid and in nonprofits basically for like 15 years. And so publishing was not my jam. And And so I told my agent, I was like, Liz, like I know nothing about this. So like I'm willing to do the creative work and the exercises that you give me in order to get the work in publishable shape. But like aside from that, like I'm gonna really lean on you for some of this business stuff, and not to say that I can't learn it myself, but I will never like, be constantly like combing the review journals or like keeping tabs on what the publishing industry is doing and things like that. Like that's just not how I wanted to spend my time anymore. And so it became like really this partnership where she could keep the pulse on the industry and let me know what was happening and how my work sort could or couldn't fit in. And she's basically just been the source of information where she tells me how it is and I present work. And if we find that there's a good fit, then we go move forward with it. But if not, she's not the kind of person who will say that, you need to change your style or you need to change the style of work in order to suit what the market is willing to buy. So I think like for people who are looking for an agent to represent them in the industry, I think like that aspect has been so important for me as a creator to feel like I can trust my partner to tell me things, to not sugarcoat it, but also to allow me to make my own decisions how I want to take my work creatively. Because, it could come a time in which, like, I mean, author advances are are sadly decreasing every year. Creators aren't getting paid very much, compared to, even the last generation, I think. So it could come to the point in which like Liz presents me something and said like, yeah, but you could really like, like make a lot more or like this, like publishers might be willing to pay more for this work if you made this one change. But that decision would be up to me, to decide like whether or not I think that it's worth it to make a change to my creative work in order to, yeah, basically like continue to make a living in this profession. And so I think that in looking for a partner as a creative who's trying to also make it a professional career, like having a partner who understands that balance and respects that balance is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even if you're not in an industry that you necessarily need an agent, I think even if I see so many painters or other illustrators that maybe are creating their own business, like Etsy shop or something,
Sure,
or selling
yeah.
prints or whatever, they tend to fall into the trap of, well, people seem to want this, so I'm going to create this
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than I want to create what I want to create,
hmm
um, and what feels true to me. Because
hmm
I think sometimes when, as a creative, if you are inauthentic in what you're making for too long, you can do it a little bit. If you need a little bit of money, you
Yeah.
can do a little bit here and there. But
Right.
if you're inauthentic for too long, it can really lead us to kind of spiral into, well, one, feeling
Generic.
really unfulfilled,
Yeah.
but two, like it can really bring up like feelings of anxiety or like not falling completely out of love with the thing that you're supposed to love the
hmm
most.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because there's a real human thing of like, yeah, but we have bills to pay. And
Yep.
then it comes into like a real kind of um, delusional amount of trust that,
hmm
you know, what feels good and authentic to you to put out is going to find its audience and it's going to work out because it
Yeah.
has to.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that it can be very tempting to just create what people are willing to pay for. But I think that is also a race to the bottom, um, because then we become afraid of trying anything different or new. But the different and the new is also where the opportunity for growth is. And so I don't know. I mean, if someone is a commercial artist and that's kind of their bread and butter, and then they find other creative outlets that are a little bit more that feel more authentic to, whatever it is their voice is at the time. Like you can do both for sure. But I think that we just have to be aware and honest with ourselves. Like, okay, like this is my moneymaker.
Yeah.
This is not, my voice, but this is what's paying the bills, and finding other ways to express ourselves that feel more authentic, that isn't so tied to what people think or are willing to buy. Like, I think just being honest with ourselves and recognizing things for what they are and not conflating the two is just important for our sanity, our productivity, our growth as artists and creators. It's yeah, just being aware of those differences is can be a lot healthier than conflating the two.
Yeah. How would you describe this? Is quite maybe a question that your son would ask.
Bring it. I'm
How would you
ready.
describe like that feeling of something feeling right to you?
Um, uh, is that about like, after you're creating something
Yeah,
or
after you're creating something or an idea that maybe your agent might come to you with an idea for a book and you think like, actually, yeah, I can make that work, or that feels good to me, or something that doesn't feel so good for you. Or when you've drawn something that may be slightly different to your normal style, and you're like, that that's feel good. That feels right for me.
Mhm.
Is there a way that you describe that feeling, or is it just a you say the words? That feels good.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's like you say, I think in our heart of hearts, we know it when we see it, or we know it when we hear it or feel it in our bodies, like if you're a dancer, like when something is what you wanted it to be. And I think that not to say that, the creating part of it was effortless. But I think that for me, it's kind of how you described it, where you feel drawn or led to do something in a certain way that you can't explain until maybe like after the fact, after it's already done. And then you can reflect on it or think about it or overanalyze it, and then you can rationalize it in some way. Um, yeah, I would say that it is kind of just this intuitive feeling, and almost like a feeling that, yeah, like I'm not in control necessarily, like 100% of the time. That there's I feel more like a channel rather than a creator. Like this isn't something that I'm just doing because I'm an artist, It's like, no, there is something else that's moving through me, and it's through me that it's able to come into being. And I would say that that doesn't happen very often for me.
Yeah.
And I think that, if you had asked me before I started illustrating or writing that, I was like, oh, like, oh, a creative life must be like so awesome because you're just like free flowing and like doing what you want and independent. But I would say that, yeah, like this feeling of, oh, this is a really good piece of work that I've done, or, this is really me or authentic or whatever. Like those moments are actually quite rare. Um, at least like for right now, like a lot of the daily grind is like that weekly Instagram post. Like it's crap. It's crap. But I know it's crap, and I know that eventually I can take enough crap and make something good of it.
Yeah.
Um, but uh but also, like, like you said, like there's a book that I'm working on now called The Tao of Nature, and it was not my idea at all. It was actually my previous editor who proposed the idea to my agent and me. And, I had to sit with the idea for quite a while because, one, I did not think that I had mastered kind of the study of Taoism in any way in which I felt like I could write or illustrate to the topic with any level of authority. I felt like, there are plenty of other writers who could write on this subject much more effectively and probably accurately than I could. Um, but ultimately, the more that I thought about it, it was really kind of not just Taoism, but also the nature part of it. And so like it was a year in which like I had spent a long time outside in nature, not just in the forests, like close to my house, but also really like engaging with it, learning about it from like various like land trusts and understanding the natural habitats that are around our house. And because I live in the Northeast now, and I grew up in the South. I grew up in Texas, and so all of this was brand new, and I was learning about it. And so, for my editor to present like Taoism from the perspective of nature, and Taoism is all about flowing with life's ups and downs and being able to find balance. A lot of those themes I could see reflected also in my learning about the natural environment. And so for that to come together at a time in which like I was discovering that side, and also pairing it with the illustrations in which like a lot of the gongbi illustrations, the Chinese brush painting that I had been learning, was really largely inspired by nature. And there are a lot of subjects in gongbi painting that take different aspects of nature, different symbolisms, and put them together. And so even though like that particular idea for that book did not come from me, from my perspective, I was in a really unique position to be able to create it. Um, and I think a lot of that becomes true. Like, are you in a position in which you can create something that no one else could? And to
Mm.
bring those elements together. And do you feel like you have a personal responsibility now to create that because you are the only person who can do it in that way? Um, so so yeah, it's interesting how these ideas can come from outside of you, but ultimately um, by reflecting and meditating on what it is that the opportunity in front of you, like you can make a decision and say like, yes, this is something I can take on, or no, like this isn't me.
Yeah, I think especially for something like that, because when it's like a philosophy, and yeah, there are loads of people that have studied it for years, and or that know the ins and outs of every intricacy, and it's really easy to
Hmm.
fall into the trap of thinking like, well, I don't know enough, so I'm not the
Hmm.
person to do that. But then you go into listening. I think that's like being receptive to life and actually seeing like, oh, actually, I can, because I can look at it in this way. I have these
Yeah.
things that have come into my life synchronistically at the same time. That's
Hmm.
quite interesting, isn't it? That
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you get that nudge because it's like all there for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good
Yeah.
point.
I love to end the conversation with two questions that I ask for everybody. There again, though, you may have to give them to your son as well.
Well, I'm making notes.
The first one is, what do you think is the most common misconception people have? Either it could be about you or it could be about the work that you do.
Um, Common misconception. I would say that the common misconception is that I I have a long history of doing both the study of the philosophy and the painting. I mean, I do think that, oh, if someone is doing this for a living, they must have been doing it forever, or they must have, had a really long ramp leading them to this point. And when I say like, actually, no, like I really only started, like 5 or 6 years ago, it's just, I don't know that people believe me necessarily. But yeah, I mean, it's true. And then I think it becomes like a source of inspiration because, you know, I I think that people look at, someone else's highlight reel and say, oh, that's not attainable for me. And I agree that it doesn't always happen or unfold in so quickly. And I do feel really lucky that that was how it happened for me. But to say that just because something's going to take a longer time is no reason to not begin, to not start somewhere. And so I always encourage people like, hey, like, I started a creative career in my mid-30s. You can too if you if you want to just try and to just start small, start with your shitty once a week posts. It's fine. And you never know where it will take you. And even if it doesn't pan out into like a full-fledged career, like, or even if you discover like, hey, like I'm actually like not progressing in a way that, is satisfying for me as a creative. Like it's okay. Like you don't have to be good at something in order for this activity to be good for you. Like I think that um you can we can be bad at things for a really long time and still learn and still grow and still get something out of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think for something to be good for you, sometimes it's better to be bad at it.
Yeah.
I think especially we're growing up in like a society where everything kind of has to be very polished, especially with the Instagram culture and stuff.
Hmm.
Sometimes we lose that feeling of just starting something for the sake of it, not needing a certificate at the end
Yeah.
or
Yep.
like an accolade or for it to make money. It can just
Hmm.
be just because.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So are you saying
Um,
I'm not going to get a certificate at the end of this podcast? Is that
I can send you one if you really want.
Just kidding.
And the second question is, if you look back, it could either be over your whole life or over your career so far. If you think to a conversation that is really memorable to you, who were you with and what did they say that's like stuck with you for all this time?
Oh gosh, I don't know. A conversation that really stuck with me. I mean, yeah, like I mean that talk that I had with my painting teacher was not just eye-opening and sent me in a different trajectory and kind of freed my expectations. But it wasn't just the message that he was conveying but rather in his delivery. Um, I would say that that's an aspect of conversation that is often overlooked these days. And that he delivered some pretty like heartbreaking news for a budding creative, right? To say that, what you are learning and what you are striving to do just isn't going to be good enough ever. And he could have easily said that in a way that really broke trust, especially from a teacher kind of student relationship there. Um, and I could have easily taken his message and, bristled and like dug my heels in and doubled down and said, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I am going to spend 80 hours a week just practicing gongbi painting and I'm going to show you that I can be a great traditional Chinese painter. And, for some people, that's that's totally what, like, up to them and how they wanted to spend their time. But I think like the way that he delivered bad news was just it built my faith and my trust in him and deepened my appreciation for the art. He positioned it as a way to, yeah, like free my imagination and to open up my mind to what this art form could become. and and that it wasn't just about following canon and mastering the skills. It was about, okay, how can you take this art form into its next phase, into a digital platform, into to a completely new audience? Like what can you do with this now that you have some basic building blocks? And so I give him so much credit for having that conversation with me, because if he hadn't told me that second part, that
Yeah.
second half of that, if he hadn't like, yeah, like followed up with that second half of the conversation, like I would be a very different creator than I am today. I would probably be in a more of an adversarial relationship with the art form rather than like a cooperative one. So yeah, I mean that the delivery of a message is something that has stuck with me because I think I learned a lot from that conversation, not just as it applied to me, but also just like how do I talk to other people now about creating, and how do I encourage others to approach creating with a more open mindset. Uh, so yeah, that's something that I hope I can keep doing.
Yeah, no, I love that because it was obviously like a cushioning, like a crashing actually blow to a creative's confidence, but also quite a massive permission slip from someone like that
Mhm. Yeah.
who, is there to continue the tradition as it is. And he's actually
Hmm.
saying, do you know what? Like, you're not here to be in this box. You're here
Mm-hmm.
to um, break it a little bit.
Hmm.
But then in breaking it, it kind of also invites people who maybe wouldn't have known that style of painting
Yeah.
into
Right.
discovering that kind of painting, which is
Yeah.
quite a big thing, I think, for someone like that to like having experienced a lot of Eastern teaching through like yoga and meditation stuff.
Hmm.
They do really
Hmm.
have their way of doing stuff and their
Yes.
insights that they give you, and sometimes it is quite brutal. But in my experience, like it is in the same way they're only being that brutal because they see something else in
Hmm.
you, in my experience, or see something within you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Regina. This has been such an awesome conversation. Just for
Yes, I agree.
everyone to find you, find your work, find your books and stuff, where's the best place that people can come to find you?
Yeah, so my website is oxherdboy.org. You can also find me on Instagram, shitty posts, awesome posts at oxherdboy. And so not just children's book, also an adult inspirational collection based on the Instagram account. And hopefully the conversation really inspired you to kind of think about creativity and artwork differently.
Definitely. Well, thank you everybody for listening. As always, if you have loved this conversation, as I'm sure you have, share it with somebody, share it with a friend, or share it on social media. If you share it on social media, then do tag us. And I'd love to know what your best takeaway was. But otherwise, thanks again for listening, everybody, and I'll see you again next week. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Maverick Mind. I hope that you've loved it, and if you have, I would appreciate it so much if you would subscribe and write a 5-star review on wherever you're listening to this podcast from. If you'd like to keep the conversation going, I invite you to join me over on Instagram at Maverick Mind Co. or on my website maverickmind.elliefoden.com. And I'll see you in another podcast very, very soon.